And hello, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa, and today's theme is Johemian Rhapsody, although it's not appearing on my screen. That's unfortunate. A couple of updates for you. This week's episode is, of course, pre-recorded as I am going to be away on Saturday, but that does not mean that we are not still going to have a kick-ass episode. I'm actually really pumped for today's episode and today's guest as Ajay Cybulski joins me to talk about our final training camp thoughts and look ahead to the Bills versus Colts preseason game with a lot of interesting players to follow. So buckle up, get some popcorn or a morning coffee, and let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
And once again, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. We are on take 2 of the pre-recorded show as I forgot to turn my Do Not Disturb off and had a call interrupt the middle of my last segment when we were recording before. So that was not fun. But now this is the real deal, AJ. This is what we're here for. And I appreciate you joining me today to talk about camp and this preseason game we got coming up.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It was nice to see football start yesterday. Got to see C.J. Stroud, a little bit of Will Anderson. Deion White, I think his name is, from the Patriots, had a really good day. And then, Malik Cunningham maybe stirring up some QB controversy. And then Tank Dell had a really good day. So that was nice to see. But, yeah, I'm excited for tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to a full weekend of football. There's also some tonight, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, it's great to have it back. I mean, just in general, I know preseason is exactly that. It's a lot of meaningless football, but for a lot of players that are fringe roster guys, it means a whole lot. And you're going to see those guys come out there and compete. And you look at yesterday's Patriots and Texans game or the Vikings Seahawks game, and you saw some lower tier names that might not have been as flashy when it came to the draft reports back in April, back in March. But there they are making their names known. And it was really fun to watch them in action, fighting for a roster spot. And for guys like Tank Dell, who had these kind of narratives about them based on their height, their size, based on their weight, and kind of their testing at the combine, for all of them to be not only playing, but some of them, including Tank Dell, to be making these splashy plays and be the star of the show is very encouraging and very exciting for some of these younger players. So my message to everybody as we go into preseason for the fringe guys is best of luck. Keep grinding. I'm sure some of you are going to get that opportunity you rightfully deserve. But AJ, as far as the Bills go, you have been our resident beat reporter for training camp for a lot of people on Twitter. And we thank you for that because your updates in real time obviously keep a lot of people in the loop when they're unable to travel, just like myself, who wasn't able to make it out there this year. So I guess I want to first ask you before we go into kind of the specific notes, but just give me some of your overall thoughts about training camp, whether that's certain players you liked, whether that's just the experience as a whole, or maybe something you took away from it as a whole.
Yeah, I will say there were a lot of fans there each and every day. It was pretty cool to see. Like, no matter what day I went, 6 days, every day I was there, it was a ton of Bills fans there representing, watching their team. I will say, I think Gabe Davis really, I know it's not a regular season yet, but I think Gabe Davis showed a lot. That's one of my biggest takeaways. I think he, contract year, a lot of narratives about him that he can't catch the ball, he's too inconsistent, stuff like that. That I think to an extent you can say there is an argument that he hasn't been consistent enough and he's dropped too many balls. But I think going into this year, he's looked smooth, he's looked good, his route runnings look crisp. He's been beating guys on the first level, second level, third level of the defense, running routes all over the place, lining up all over the place. So that's one of the things that I've really taken away. Dalton Kincaid, obviously, that's been a big talking point. He had a great catch on the last day of camp off a deflection from Tim Settle. It wasn't the smartest throw from Josh. I will say he probably shouldn't have thrown that ball, but somehow it got to the rookie, and the rookie scored the touchdown, and the Bills offense was happy. But I will say that the Bills offensive line as well had a pretty good camp. I'm not overly concerned. There was one really bad day, the second day at pads. But besides that, the offense looked crisp. The defense made some plays. Micah Hyde made a great play on the final day of practice, which is nice to see from a guy that, he's always on the field, but no one really takes note of him just because he's been such a consistent presence for the Bills for so long that people aren't really paying attention to a player like that. And then, Poyer making plays out of Oliver. So all in all, they're on both sides of the ball. There's players making plays, and hopefully with this preseason game, we can get a look at the QB2 situation that some seem to be so concerned about, and other stuff like that.
Yes, the ever vaunted quarterback 2 battle, which I don't think I have ever seen it in the Josh Allen era be discussed this much, that I'm kind of the camp that I believe in superstition, and I'm not going to give any power to it. So I'm not even going to mention it, man. But also, it being completely serious here, I just find that I think the elbow injury that Allen suffered last year has raised a lot of people's concerns over who is the backup. But a very important mantra that Mr. Greg Thompson says all the time, that we kind of usher in cover one and usher all around, is that if you're talking about a backup quarterback, you're probably in a bad spot to begin with. And it's probably a circumstance where you're in a losing battle because your starter might be missing time. So I'm not really hyper focused on the quarterback 2 mantra, but if I had to say anything, I think Matt Barkley, while he obviously isn't Josh Allen, is a guy who's played in the system, is a guy who knows the guys and has some chemistry. And while he might not be able to do everything, and obviously is on that backup quarterback totem for a reason, I do feel like if you were relying on him for 1 to 2, 1 to 3 games, I don't hate the idea, especially if some of my thoughts about the Bills running game come true, where it becomes something that you can rely on a bit more, and then maybe take some of the load off of a backup if you need to get to that point. But I am hoping we don't. I am hoping Josh Allen stays healthy the whole year, and that ends up being a non-conversation. But AJ, to some of the things you brought up, I'm really happy you brought up Gabe Davis, because for anyone who watches the show consistently, I'm a huge Gabe Davis defender. I think some of the criticisms of him have been a bit too harsh. He is not without blame in certain situations, and I'm sure even he would say that at times there were catches he would like to have made, but there were also passes behind him. There were also vertical throws and vertical routes with very low probability of being completed, to the point where I think if you're just blindly looking at Gabe Davis's numbers, it kind of leads you astray to the very talented receiver that you have on your roster. And for him to be having a good camp, not even just a good camp, but a camp that's being praised by everybody, and people saying that he looks sharper at the line of scrimmage, that his release looks really quick, that he looks like he's getting open, like you said, at every level of the field, then for me, that's boding incredible amounts of confidence in Gabe Davis. And it's making me even more excited to watch him in addition to an already stacked receiving core. So that is something that I'm glad you brought up, AJ. And as far as Kincaid, I've talked about how excited I am for him. I'm sure every every member of Bills Mafia is on the same wave as you, as myself. But yes, to see some of these advanced level catches from Kincaid, not just him getting open with his feet and catching something when he's wide open, but for him to stay concentrated on certain catches, like that very stellar sliding grab that was posted on the Bills official page, or the tip drill catch in the red zone. These are things that I think really make the hype for Kincaid even more valid, because we're not just talking about a prospect that, he's great, he's getting open, we're happy about it, but a guy that when he's not wide open and might have some coverage on him or might be in a tight window, can still process and make a play on the ball, something that, for a lot of guys, that takes a very stern developmental curve. And it's not to say that Kincaid won't have that, but more to say that he's showing signs that he will get there much faster than your average rookie, which gives me, and I think every fan, the justification for being excited for him. And AJ, to your last point, the offensive line. It is reassuring to see it work. It is reassuring that they've had practices that looked good, that they looked like they're gelling well as a unit. Certain members of the line like Spencer Brown, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, these guys were not here last season. And some of them when we had past line formations, it just didn't work out. And Spencer Brown, an example, someone that didn't start out with the line right away and took time to gel with them and never really got his footing. So for him to be there for pretty much the whole camp, to work with Cromer, to get the right tackle position kind of set in stone, to know you're the starter, as well as having Torrance and Bates in that battle and kind of having him learn position, getting the reps, getting used to it, trying to work on his pass protection sets. And then to talk about McGovern just being solid on the left side with Deion Dawkins, it gives me hope that at least this offensive line will take a step forward to some degree. Whether that's a top 10 unit, to be seen, but I do think it's likely that assuming they all stay healthy, you could see a formidable group this year that can help protect Josh Allen. So, AJ, any other thoughts about camp?
Yeah, I'm just going to add to the I have three things, or maybe two, because I might have forgot the third one. Well, I said it, I have three things to talk about. But the first one with Gabe Davis, going back to him, when he lines up on the outside now and coming off of an ankle injury where every play last year, in his mind, every break, every when he got to his stop, every time he made a route, tried to, do a route every single week, the ankle was in his mind. And I know people talk about the ankle injury and how, well, it's his ankle. Why are his hands not working? But if you've I've never played the receiver position, but if you're going out there every rep and in the back of your mind, you just want to make sure, first of all, that you don't do something to further that injury and, cause you to miss time, extended time when you know how valuable you are to this team. I think that can play mentally big time, even more than the physically, the ankle injury that you're dealing with. So that's the first thing about Gabe, and just why I think you've seen just through the crisp route running and his ability to get open and separate, and just his confidence and Josh Allen in a team drill, the final team drill on the final day of practice on Thursday. Gabe caught 3 balls in a row in team drill and was dancing. You could just tell he was just, he was vibing, he was feeling himself, and he was just very confident. And the second thing to add to the Gabe Davis thing too, that also has been a takeaway, is Ken Dorsey's creativity. Not only is Gabe Davis getting open all over the field, but Ken Dorsey is utilizing him all over the field, getting him open at different levels, separating in the slot, on the boundary, up the seam. He's doing all different sorts of things. And I think that shows you something that Ken Dorsey had trouble with last year, was Gabe Davis was kind of doing one thing, and his route tree was kind of limited. This year, I think it's kind of showing that Ken Dorsey, maybe he has learned something. Maybe he does trust Gabe Davis more. Maybe that ankle injury isn't as lingering, so he can extend that route tree. And so those two things combined, from the injury aspect and the offensive coordinator aspect, I think have both helped Gabe Davis's camp.
And his route tree was a conversation that had been had amongst the fans, but also by national people, or at least other football insiders that had watched Gabe Davis and seen some of his plays and were wondering kind of why his tree was so limited. And I do think that when you talk about his stat line, that is something to be mentioned, because it did feel like, at least maybe from Ken Dorsey wanting to try, or being a first-time offensive coordinator, maybe because of the concern over Gabe Davis's ankle and maybe not wanting to put him in a position where he has to have too much of a dynamic route tree with the concern over re-aggravation or injury. I don't know. But that, to me, I think when you have that in mind and look at his stats, it tells you a lot about his production, despite the fact that he had a limited route tree. Because for him to still accrue over 800 yards, for him to still have about 7 touchdowns, and we're not talking about playoffs, then that's still pretty good for what you could consider a one-trick pony. I remember Judge posted a chart, or at least reposted a chart, that was showing the most touchdowns scored since, I believe it was 2018. And please forgive me if I have butchered this chart. I should have pulled it up. I didn't know we were going to get to this point, but it was something like he was number 10 on the list. And, one person had mentioned he's a one-trick pony. All he does is score touchdowns. Yeah. All he does is score touchdowns. That's a good problem to have. And he's not even at his peak yet. Because remember, in each year that Gabe Davis has been in the league, it's been a crowded room in front of him. So his rookie year, he has John Brown. His following year, it's Emmanuel Sanders. 2 very good vets, people that did enhance the receiver core, at least for a time, before injury or maybe changes to defenses that kind of slowed them down. This past year was Gabe Davis's first true year as the wide receiver 2 in this offense. I know he's been crowned a wide receiver 1. I know that happened on one of your Twitter posts, AJ, but with Stephon Diggs, that is your primary guy. And Diggs is kind of the one Davis is the one that coincides with him. So he obviously, as a first-time wide receiver too, with that role in his lap, there's going to be a learning curve. That just is what it is when it comes to getting a first-time or a full-time starting position somewhere when you weren't doing that the year prior. And you can make that same thing or same argument for Isaiah McKenzie, only kind of the inverse, where he did earn that slot role. It was open for him and it didn't pan out the way we had hoped it would. So with Gabe Davis this upcoming season, I am really encouraged and excited by the fact that he is getting some different types of looks, different types of routes in camp from Ken Dorsey, and really curious what his role will be this upcoming year. And AJ, I will ask you this question because I'm going to predict it right now, but I had said in the past, and I'll say it now, I think his stat line will look a bit similar just because I think the overall offensive production, the amount of runs that we have, the spread of the passes going to a bunch of different receivers, I think that's going to increase completely, meaning that Davis might not get the true 1,000 yards, but I think his production will still be meaningful, still be in, a huge boost to this offense, even if on the stat sheet it might look similar. What do you think his final line will look like at the end of the year?
I mean, yeah, I could see anywhere from like 800 to 1,100 yards, somewhere in the 7 to 11 touchdown range. The thing with Gabe and why I think he's such a pivotal piece, and at one point before the whole Spencer Brown thing occurred, and they didn't really go after any depth, and that's kind of my biggest worry. And he's like kind of the most important piece for this offense for me. But before that, it was Gabe, and that's because I think when you look at the Eagles, who have Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, you have the Bengals, who have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. You have the Chiefs, who I know they only have really one guy, but he's really, really good, like one of the best players in the NFL, the best tight end of all time. Plus, there's always a guy each week for the Chiefs that contributes. So let's just say Kelsey and a plethora of playmakers that the Chiefs have kind of combined, because there's always that guy, MVS, Kadarius Toney. There's always that one guy that kind of steps up for them. The Bills need that consistent, reliable guy. And last year they relied too much on Diggs sometimes, and they didn't have an answer when Diggs was getting taken away, and the short passing game just wasn't there. There was not even an extension of the run game with the short passing game last year. So you need Gabe Davis to be that consistent presence. Joe, I think I agree with you. A more consistent season while putting up the same stat line would probably be more meaningful than going for 191 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Steelers and getting a fourth of his yards in one game and then kind of disappearing for stretches at times during the season. So yeah, 700, 800 to 1,100 yards, 7 to 11 touchdowns. And I think that the Bills need to find a consistent second guy. If it's Gabe every other game, and Kincaid can get in there, and Knox, whatever, but they need to find 2 guys each week that can be dominant, just like those 3 teams that I just mentioned.
7-11. You'd think we were talking about Chris Hogan over here, but I agree with you, man. And I think that a big part, and I've said this before, but I just think while we're on the topic, when we'll move on from it shortly, it needs to be addressed. But a lot of the Gabe Davis discourse, I think, gets clouded from the fact of what his final production ended up being, but also kind of disregarding the fact that the ankle did linger for a couple of weeks. That I think it deprived us of a true 1,000-yard Gabe Davis season, which I think if people saw the arbitrary 1,000 yards, it might have even just changed the entire conversation in general. But yes, that's kind of what I think his production is going to look like this year. I'm very excited to watch Gabe Davis and to see the fact that he's had a great camp. I really do have high hopes for him being a key contributor in this offense this year. But AJ, let's move on. We have a week 1, or at least week 1 of the preseason game coming up against Indianapolis, which, as is tradition. And there are a lot of players, a lot of starters that are actually going to play in this game. I know most of them are going to be playing at least a quarter. I know Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs will not be. I don't know who some of the other starters that might not play will be. I would like to imagine Ed Oliver might sit this one out, considering the lingering back soreness. I know he practiced yesterday, but it seems to me that maybe just with that in mind, might not be worth it to get him out there on the field. So AJ, give me some of the players that this upcoming week you're very excited to watch in this game and kind of what you hope to see out of them.
Yeah, and just a side note on Ed, like he was right in front of me yesterday, and you could tell when he came off the field at times he was kind of still laboring, and not like bad, but you could tell like he's like kind of stretching. He wasn't like his usual fun self, so like maybe a little frustration there. But yeah, this weekend I'm excited. Tomorrow, a big game for the Bills. There's 2 guys that come to mind for me. One, Balin Spector. Look, the dude day 3 of camp, got first team reps, and everyone who I've talked to said they really liked him. The players after the practice said they were really fond of him. He had command of the huddle, stuff like that. So I want to see what Bale Inspector can do, especially with Terrell Bernard going down with a hamstring injury. Joe Marino actually put out a tweet that I wasn't aware of. Terrell Bernard's had major injury concerns throughout his career, so that's something maybe to keep an eye on for the future. But look, it's a big test for Bale Inspector. I think he's going to get a lot of run at the Mike position, especially if Bernard can't go. You have Dodson there. You have AJ Klein maybe that you can throw into the mix. But it's going to be a lot of Bale Inspector tomorrow. I want to see him command the huddle. I want to see him be aggressive. I want to see him being put on those slot or tight end guys to see how he does in coverage, how he can match up against some of the Colts weapons. So that's defensively. Offensively, I think, and I'll predict it kind of. I was listening to Matt and Ryan on the Shout podcast. They were talking about this guy. This was kind of my prediction with him. Andy Isabella, the wide receiver. Look, the guy probably doesn't have a path to the roster, but I could totally see him, like an Isaiah Hodgins last year, make so many plays during training camp that there's some Bills fans that fall in love with him so much that they're like, why the heck did they cut him? But there just isn't the room for me. But he's just showed, his route running ability. He left Alex Austin yesterday at practice on a 1v1 rep in the dust. Got like 10 yards of separation. The guy had no chance. It was a sick double move, great release, sick double move at the top of the route, and then just finish the play out for a touchdown. So I want to see what he can do in the return game, in the receiving game. I think they can do some gadget stuff with him. So that's just a guy on offense that I think can make some noise. But I really do want to see that interior offensive line, Connor McGovern, who I think has had an okay camp, been inconsistent. And then on the flip side, Torrance had a rough day yesterday. Ryan Bates has been getting more first reps as we've gone on here the last week. And I think he's the leader in the clubhouse now in terms of the position, but I still think Torrance is not by any means out of it. But at the same time, I want to see how that kind of battle plays out and how that interior offensive line looks.
Yeah, that's when in regards to Andy Isabella, that is one that I'm interested in watching too. He was a name that when he got drafted, I definitely was intrigued by him as a prospect, but unfortunately he goes to the Cardinals, out of sight, out of mind. We're not really thinking about him. It's kind of cool to see him end up here in this preseason. And yeah, there is always that one guy, that Brandon Riley, that Derek Rogers, one of those guys that just seems to light it up in camp, but then you kind of forget about him, or like it's just a camp kind of success and they don't really do anything anywhere else. Isaiah Hodgins, though, seems to be having a promising young career with the Giants. So shout out to him. He has a lot of love from the guys in this locker room. Never rooted against the guy. In fact, I thought there was a place for him, but they felt that they had enough and he moved on elsewhere and he's getting used, and we'll see him again this season. But it is pretty common that there is that one name that you see that you kind of root for, but like, is he going to actually make the roster? Do we fawn over him a little too much? And that guy for me isn't Andy Isabella. It's actually Shane Ray. And I am kind of excited to watch him tomorrow. I know Shane Ray's still got that, that DN mentality. He's still a dog. I know about the fight yesterday between him and Tommy Doyle, but his redemption arc is a really, really cool story, from going from first round pick to being, at what he deemed kind of a low point, to him coming back and having an opportunity to be in the NFL. I don't know what the future holds for Shane Ray, but I'm absolutely cognizant of that story, and I'm going to root for the guy and hope that he can, make some noise in a preseason game. Because guess what? Beyond the fact that it's a cool story, what's even cooler is edge depth, is having assurance after the next guy to know that someone could be productive stepping in. And to be completely honest with you, I just don't know what Boogie Basham is going to look like this season. And if Boogie Basham doesn't seem to really make any noise, but I see a veteran defensive end like Shane Ray making noise, that might make the previous player someone that you might consider, moving around, finding somewhere else for him to go, because you might have the viable depth option there with you, someone who has actually played for Super Bowl defenses. So talking about just like the guys that you'll see later in the game, in the later quarters, that's someone I'm excited to watch. But of course, I'll talk about Dorian Williams for the Matt Milano depth purpose. I do have a lot of faith in him as a prospect. I didn't initially, but that grew on me over time. I'm excited to see what he does at the weak side and if his coverage ability looks good, if they're coaching him up enough, if he's physical, if the blocks, or if he's able to shed his blocks and start looking like he's developing well in that regard. What Babbage said about him the other day was very interesting to me because it really did sound that they weren't really concerned about his physical tools, but that they are essentially rebuilding his mental game, that they are re-exposing him to a brand new playbook. Babbage mentioned that there were things about the playbook that he had never even heard of before. And I think with that context, it makes more sense as to why they're essentially slowly integrating him, because it sounds like to me that he is another project, which if you look at the draft history of the Buffalo Bills in the Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott era, they love projects. They adore it. They are builders. Good for them, man. I do not have the patience for that kind of stuff, but that seems to be what they're into. So that's what Dorian Williams seems like to me. And I'm excited to see the kid get some reps tomorrow. Let's see how he looks. Because listen, as much as I love Matt Milano, the All-Pro, and I know what he's capable of, and obviously not wishing this for him, there you have to be prepared if someone who's playing a physical position gets a physical injury and needs to sit out for a quarter, needs to sit out for a few games. So if Dorian Williams is coming along well, then that depth drop-off not being so much of a drop-off is something I will greatly welcome. But on the offensive side of the ball, AJ, you had mentioned Dalton, or you had mentioned Andy Isabella. Obviously, I could talk about Dalton Kincaid, but I've talked about Dalton Kincaid every episode, and we all know we're excited for him. So I'll disregard him for now, but am looking forward to him. But Trent Sherfield and Deontay Hardy, those two specifically. Because when you talk about starters getting a quarter, I have to imagine they're in the mix. They're guys that were free agent signings, seem to be lighting it up in camp, seem to be having a bigger role in this offense as a whole. I think they're going to get their shot, and I am very much looking forward to watching them. I think just assuring that you have another middle of the field body who can get himself open, be productive, find the soft spots in the zone, get leverage when he needs to get it in Sherfield. That's something that I think, even though we do have the Kincaid for that reason to make those 12 personnel packages and get that option, it is still important to have a receiver who can do the same thing. Maybe play, there isn't deep coverage and they have very stacked looks, and you want to exploit that with two guys that are capable of getting open there and giving these, second level defenders some fits. That's something I'd really like to see Sherfield do tomorrow. And as far as Deontay Hardy, I mean, I've always said he's kind of like the Isaiah McKenzie role. If you gave it like Trent, it's just going to have a lot more versatility to it. I think apart from motions, I think you could very well see him be used in screens, direct handoffs. I think he could even go upfield and split defenders, which if that's happening and we already have like two viable deep threats, then, good luck. I wish you the best of luck in trying to defend that. And I'm very curious what Dorsey chalks up for them tomorrow. So those are some players that I'm looking forward to. AJ, can you think of any other you'd want to mention?
Yeah, I like the Trent Sherfield, Deontay Hardy thing. Deontay Hardy started hot, I think, during camp, and as camp went on, he's kind of cooled off. He hasn't made too many big plays, but he's won some one-on-ones, and obviously, for a guy like that, one-on-ones is his bread and butter just because of his speed and separation ability. And then the Trent Sherfields of the world, I mean, look, those guys could even be playing a half. I mean, I could see them really heavily rotating those guys. I think it's important for guys like that who are new to learn the offense, a complicated one with that. So, yeah, other than that, obviously you mentioned Kincaid. Obviously Spencer Brown is going to be a popular one. Obviously, I think a lot of people are going to be watching how Spencer Brown performs. I think it's a big game for him, but like I said, he'll only get a quarter of the run. So, yeah, I like the names you mentioned. Justin Shorter's a guy that you're going to see a lot of. Let's see what he can do. Let's see if he can make an impact as a gunner on special teams, anything like that. But we'll see what he does. He's had actually a really strong last couple of days. I felt like at the beginning of camp, mentally, his confidence was kind of lacking. He had a couple of drops during individual drills. And then the last couple of days, blue and red scrimmage, he had a nice catch from Kyle Allen. Yesterday had another great catch from Kyle Allen. So that's going to be a duo that you're going to see a lot from just because of the amount of time I think both those guys will be on the field. Then you want to, you can get down the path of Quentin Morris, who I think is almost a lock at this point. I think he's just been so consistent. The Jay Sternberger kind of battle that some were hoping for, I don't think really has taken shape. I think it's Quentin Morris has just been such a consistent guy. He's been with the first team multiple times during practice throughout this whole process. Reggie Gilliam's another guy. How does he do while in blocks? Is he lined up at fullback? Is he lined up as a tight end? Where do they utilize that kind of guy? It'll be interesting to see where they play him. So yeah, those are just a couple more names that I think you'll see a lot from. And if you really want to look at maybe the not popular guys, those are three guys: Reggie Gilliam, Quentin Morris, and whoever the third guy I mentioned. Those three are some of the undernamed guys, guys that we're not talking about a lot.
There's a lot of fan love for Justin Shorter. And I mean, listen, when I saw the shirtless pic of him, I was fawned over too. I wish I looked like that. That man is ripped. But in all seriousness, he is the type of guy that I think matches the play style of Josh Allen well. When we talked a few weeks ago, I don't recall which episode this was. They're all kind of looking the same to me, which means I've been here a while. Isn't that cool, AJ? But when it comes to Justin Shorter, I think he's a good deep ball tracker and also could be a very good red zone presence just with his size alone. So I think tomorrow is a great opportunity, or today, if you're watching this after we post this on YouTube. I think that's a great opportunity for Justin Shorter to really show what he can bring to the offense beyond just special teams gunner. Because I think really at this point, unless Tyrell Shavers has a very, very good game and a very strong rest of the preseason, it seems that Justin Shorter is going to get that nod just because of where he was picked, the fact that he's fifth rounder, the fact that there's room for him to grow, and obviously this organization being McDermott, they very much value special teams play and that versatility. So that is a big opportunity for him tomorrow. I'm excited to watch him. One last player I want to mention, because I do think that the starting safeties, just given the fact that Poyer's had some vet rests, that Micah Hyde's coming back from the neck injury, I do think that they're going to sit them. I don't know for sure, but this is just my lingering suspicion, and that they're going to give Hamlin and Rapp the starting nod. And I'm really interested to see both. I mean, Damar Hamlin coming back to football after everything he faced, obviously a huge mental hump to go over, and he's had a couple hits in practice. You know, I'm sure he's starting to get reacclimated, but this is the first game action that he's going to be experiencing since everything happened in Cincinnati. So I am very curious to watch him kind of compete and see what he has, because I really don't think you're going to see him drop off, assuming he's mentally prepared, assuming he's fully ready. I think Hamlin had a very solid year given the circumstances that he had to kind of come into with Hyde getting hurt and a banged up Jordan Poyer. I don't think you're going to see a drop off in skill. I think you'll see more of the same that you saw from him last year, but with more of the ability to refine and develop his game. It's really just a matter of, can he go out there, be physical? Does it look like he's kind of holding himself back out of concerns over what happened? Like, these are things that I'm very interested in watching from him. And then when I talk about Taylor Rapp, I mean, I've talked with you about it in spaces, I've talked to everybody, but how are they going to use him? Are we going to see a Taylor Rapp linebacker look? Are we going to see a dime look from the defense? Is Taylor Rapp just going to be a conventional safety? Are there going to be some interesting scenarios where maybe Taron Johnson comes off the field and Rapp is the nickel? There's a lot you can do with him, and I think that's why I'm very excited to see him too, for the versatility component, and also maybe if McDermott wants to kind of give us a sneak peek at some of the wrinkles he might be cooking up for the regular season. So, AJ, you got anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the cornerback 2 battle. I mean, we've gone through the whole team at this point, so might as well keep going. I think the cornerback 2 battle is another thing. Like, I'm almost at the point where it's going to be a by committee, like, approach all season, and I know that like people are going to be like, why do they always rotate, or why do you think that? I just think they like the versatility from all three of them. There's been some rumblings that maybe if Elam and Benford can show out in these 3 preseason games, and Dane Jackson maybe could be a trade candidate. I don't see it. I wouldn't want the Bills to. I think he's a veteran presence in the locker room, and he's that reliable depth piece that if Benford and Elam start playing shaky or inconsistent, you can turn to him and, you know, put him in there and expect what to expect. But yeah, I mean, the cornerback 2 battle is going to be interesting. I don't know if we'll see Trey White. I'd love to see like a Dane Benford combo, or a Dane Elam combo, or Elam Benford go with the young guys and, you know, 2 second-year players, and let them be on the field at the same time to see what they can do. But yeah, the secondary in general, Joe, I think you bring up a great point with Taylor Rapp, another new face. Get him in the system, see what he can do. Obviously a great tackler. Can he make those plays in the shallow part of the field? Will they dial up some pressure with Taylor Rapp in containment to show off his tackling ability in the open field? So yeah, there's a lot of things that on both sides of the ball that we can talk about and look forward to tomorrow or today if you're listening to it.
Yeah, I'm going to slate this one to upload at normal time. So obviously the schedule doesn't change. So today, I should say today, but it's 3:39 p.m. on Friday. I'll probably say tomorrow. Everyone knows what I mean. We're all talking about the same game, but glad you bring up CB2 battle, because I had said a couple weeks ago when I had Kevin and Mike on the show that if Alex Austin looks good in camp, that it would make Dane Jackson a trade candidate. But I think the way camp has shaped out, even if Austin's getting some reps, like it seems like this is Dane's job. He's not losing it. He's not going anywhere. Even though he is on a 1-year deal, I do think that having the veteran presence does matter. It does help. And Kyer Elam, I've heard back and forth on his camp performance that he's been looking good, but he also has had some ugly plays that he might not be fully situated yet. Benford, obviously a young guy too, and he's had great moments, but I've also heard he's kind of just been pedestrian at times. It's been like a back and forth on both. So Dane kind of is that like stable kind of glue to that room that I think having him does provide you with value. And I think that now that you don't have another rookie that is kind of breathing down his neck, but looks like he is playing to his draft position, and Dane Jackson's been here a couple years, that Dane is likely going to stay and maybe, be the anchor in that CB2 room that can really benefit them, where you might have scenarios where Trey White is your obvious one. But now, heaven forbid, something happens to Trey. Now you know that there is depth at CB1 as well, and that kind of cornerback room doesn't have a total drop-off. But also in situations where you're playing different types of receivers or different game plans, you could very well see different corners lining up. I mean, I talk about Kyer Elam as a press man corner very often, but against some of the speedier wide receivers and tempo-based offenses, so maybe Cincinnati, Miami, Kansas City, where you might have to get these guys kind of off their tempo a little bit, that's where I think you could see Elam, really Benford kind of step up in those scenarios. But if you want to run with like a too high zone heavy approach, I think you could benefit from having Dane Jackson, who's just been in the scheme and kind of understands that a bit. So I am excited to see the CB2. I'm excited for everybody. I've said that word like 100 times on this show, but I'm looking forward to watching the CB2 room, to kind of seeing who really emerges as the front runner, if anyone does at all. And, hopefully they stay healthy. They all compete pretty well. And we have a full year of just healthy secondary play for the first time since 2021. AJ, I do want to bring something up, though, because you mentioned this before, and I actually pulled up the tweet. So shout out to Joe Marino for tweeting this. He said this yesterday in the wake of the Terrell Bernard hamstring news. And Joe Marino, you all know who he is, but if you somehow don't, please give him a follow. He is one of the most knowledgeable people you could possibly follow in the Bills Twitter space. He's excellent. I'm trying to figure out a weekend where I can get him on here because I really value his input. Tremendous. And he had tweeted that the Bills linebacker Terrell Bernard left today's practice with a hamstring injury, didn't return. And then you alluded to in this tweet, his history was concerning. So I'll read it off for all of you. 2017, it was a season-ending broken foot. In 2019, it was a broken hand that required surgery. In 2020, it was a season-ending shoulder injury, emphasized it was a fractured shoulder and a torn labrum. And in 2021, he missed one game with a knee injury. He had it scoped. So when it comes to injury history, I think the term injury prone gets thrown around a lot. I know people believe in it, some don't. I think it depends on the context of your injury. When it comes to Terrell Bernard, he's had a couple surgeries, but at the same time, those injuries were relatively frequent. Playing a physical position, broke his hand, broke his foot, broken bone. But as far as like soft tissues, the shoulder injury is really the only one that I would say would like breed any concern for me. But apart from that, this is like the first time I'm hearing of like any, hamstring, anything like that with him specifically. So while the past can be seen as concerning if you're worried about, how did he recover after surgery and is he going to be durable? I also think that like something like this, a hamstring injury, is a common injury around the league, and we don't know the extent of it yet, but I don't quite believe that it's going to make me hyper concerned for Terrell Bernard as a whole. Do I think it's worth acknowledging the past of what he's dealt with? Sure. But I think you could look at a lot of players in the league and see some of their injury histories as well and kind of make a similar argument without being as concerned because they've been able to stay on the field. I mean, we've had these concerns about Matt Milano in the past, and he's kind of quelled those doubts as well. So I just wanted to bring this up because I know you mentioned it, but I'm not too worried about the Terrell Bernard injury history. I mean, he's been in practice. It was a freak hamstring thing. If that lingers throughout the year, then of course we could talk about it more. but it's not really something where I'm going to sit here and say like I'm kind of too worried, or not too worried. And I'm not, saying you're like hyper concerned, but I'm not like kind of panicking about him. Although I will say, and I want to segue into a conversation about middle linebacker, AJ, and you could give me your thoughts on this. I think Dotson at this point has to be the favorite, right? Because I mean, now that Bernard is going to be shelved for what could be 2 to 5 weeks, is according to some people, it might seem like Dotson's now just going to get the runs with the ones, and that's it. That's your guy. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Terrell Dotson's the leader. In the clubhouse, again, he's so good at shooting the run gap, and I know he's an undrafted player from Texas A&M, and he hasn't really done much in the league. But he's still relatively young. He's got a bigger build. He's got 20 pounds on Bernard. I think Dotson's like 235. Bernard's like 215. So Dotson's just a bigger linebacker, a bigger presence in the middle. I like what I've seen from him so far. I want to see him in coverage a little bit more, just because of I think he's struggled there at times. But yeah, I think it's his job to lose. I really do think Baylon Spector, depending how long this hamstring injury bothers or lingers for Terrell Bernard, I could see Baylon Spector making a push for it. I don't think he'll win the job, but I think there'll be a Baylon Spector fan club by the end of this training camp that say, hey, maybe like they could see what the Bills can see what we can get out of him during the regular season at some points, or get him in some packages, or use his versatility. The guy's a freak athlete. But yeah, I think, like you said, Joe, it's Dotson's job to lose, especially with this injury and depending how long it lingers. I like what I've seen from Dotson. I'm not overly confident with him, but I think when you surround him with the talent the Bills have on the defensive side of the ball, you can you don't have to rely on Terrell Dotson as much. But as long as he's the guy calling the plays, getting the guys in the right spot, which I think with the comfortability of being in the system now for, going into his 4th year, I think that will occur. And I'm excited to see what Dotson can bring. It's not the Tremaine Edmonds, the 6'5" first-round pick, but it's a guy that, again, shoots run gaps, plays hard, plays downhill, and hopefully can make some plays in coverage.
Tyrel Dotson, I agree. One of the strengths of his game is how he shoots run gaps, his front seven ability, his presence. I think that was one of the things when I did a linebacker episode, I alluded to. One, the fact that he was a veteran whose work with McDermott just breeds confidence, some consistency, being there behind Tremaine Edmonds all these years, I think gave him the leg up with room to be, kind of dethroned in the competition, which Bernard had seemed to be the person that was giving him the most competition and most risk of being dethroned. But I think now with that injury, Tyrel Dotson having that familiarity, it seems like there's no reason to say that he isn't the starter at this point. Now, as far as Baylon Spector goes, I think now you have to have Baylon Spector get more 1 reps only because you need to have the depth for Tyrel Dotson if Bernard isn't ready to go in week 1. And we know that the Jets are likely going to be throwing a lot of runs at the Bills, try to test the physicality early, try to keep the ball from being thrown too much by Aaron Rodgers, because even though he is a Hall of Fame quarterback, he is older. The offensive line protection is a huge question mark for them. I have a very strong feeling that the Jets are going to emphasize running up the middle against the Bills to test their tackles, and also their middle linebacker, which I'm sure they are very well aware is a question mark as a whole. And for Tyrel Dotson, I think when we talk about the battle right now, that's the person that I have the most faith in to be able to do so because of his familiarity, because of his physicality, because of his very large frame, the fact that he can get up and disrupt those run plays, and also the fact that a middle linebacker in this system right now, considering the defensive line depth, assuming, and this is an assumption, but assuming that the defensive line plays well and generates pressure and disrupts run plays and is able to kind of make things a mess at the line of scrimmage for any offense, especially one with a more questionable offensive line like the Jets. And for Jets fans who might actually see this, I know the Bills have one too, but we're talking about your side of the ball specifically. The Jets offensive line might not be able to handle a defensive line that could be as disruptive as Buffalo's. You could be talking about run plays getting, kind of jammed, off rhythm, off tempo, blocks not being assigned properly, just kind of a mess as a whole. And you enter Tyrel Dotson, who now kind of sees this as an opportunity to clean this play up and kind of cap off the play, which I think Tremaine Edmonds was greatly benefiting from last season, and kind of partial reasoning that he really ascended the way he did and priced himself out of Buffalo. So for Tyrel Dotson, I am looking forward to seeing kind of how he performs tomorrow. I know he's going to get some snaps, but really, I think that's what you can expect to see from him this year. But also, if pass coverage is any concern with any of these guys, again, That's what Taylor Rapp's for. You had him line up at linebacker. You know that he's a versatile piece. If you are worried about a linebacker who might not be able to cover and none of these guys are really showing you anything, then I think this is the perfect chance to have that kind of dime look or some sort of formation or pre-snap look where Taylor Rapp's up top or, up at the front seven and then dropping back into coverage and really just trying to confuse quarterbacks and really anybody on the offense. So, yeah, AJ, do you have any more thoughts on the middle linebacker battle?
Nothing much. I will say I did predict wrong. I said Dotson was the favorite in like May or June. I put out a tweet. I thought Dotson was going to win the job, but I had Dorian Williams at second. Clearly that did not happen. But I talked to the guy at the combine. I interviewed him. I talked to him about Tremaine Edmonds and what he's watched from him. I like the player. I watched film on him. I thought he was a guy that could be that mid-round target for the Bills, and I liked what he brought at Tulane. Following him and his teammate Tajay Spears, another guy that I thought was special as well. It was cool to see them kind of journey together, and listening to them talk about each other multiple times was cool. So he was kind of a guy I've been rooting for. But Joe, like you said, I'm excited to see what he can bring at the weak side linebacker position tomorrow. And not much else. I think Terrell Dotson is not in the driver's seat per se, but depending on how Bernard is with that injury, I think he's getting close.
Yeah, I think it was more like forced into the driver's seat versus having it, because it seemed like a 50-50 split. And now It's you don't have anyone that's really been getting consistent 1 reps besides a little bit of Spector. So I think it just has to be him right now. But yeah, Dorian Williams was my second pick as well. And I think when I did my episode at the time, they had kind of been flip-floppy about where they were going to really use him. And I was kind of suspecting that he would get into that battle in middle linebacker. But, again, I don't rule out that could be the case in the future. Maybe not this season, but the next, if they do have concerns at linebacker. But yeah, Dorian Williams could just be one of those depth pieces that a good team just ended up drafting in the late 3rd round, decided that they just wanted to have that kind of checked in case Milano ever went down. Knock on wood that he doesn't. And then you talk about, actually, hang on. Have to actually knock on wood when I say knock on wood, but it could be a circumstance where it was just depth all along. But if he's good depth, then I'll never complain. I'll never be mad at it, because ultimately you need to have deep teams to win in the playoffs, to avoid having major drop-offs at certain positions, and to avoid really kind of looking for sage and trying to light it around your house if Matt Milano ever gets hurt. Knock on wood again. So with that all said, there is another kind of, I guess you can call it pairing, and it's not necessarily a battle, more of like a matching of talents that I did want to talk to you about today. And that's Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. And what I am going to ask you, AJ, is first your thoughts on the two, kind of what you saw from camp with 12 personnel and how that looked and how they looked on the field together. But also, do you feel that these two are making each other better as they play together more often? Because we've seen, both of them making stellar catches and this kind of chemistry that's forming between them. So just give me your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I really like what I've seen from both Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. I like, first of all, I know the Bills did this on purpose. They drafted the guys with the same initials just for that ability to people that, there's going to be something created throughout the year, because I think both these guys will be used frequently in the red zone, and they're going to be scoring touchdowns, where there's going to be something that some Bills fan out there is going to create some saying or something with the DK, something like that. But yeah, I really like what I've seen from them. Dawson Knox, again, I think he finished camp strongly. During the red and blue scrimmage, he had a drop. Dalton Kincaid had a drop. The playmakers just didn't seem like they were. That was the worst kind of day from the playmakers. And of course, it was when everybody was there and people were freaking out about it. But overall, I mean, they've done both a really good job. I like the usage of 12 personnel, a lot of 11.5 personnel. Like Dawson Knox has been in line a lot with Kincaid in the boundary or in the slot. He's been all over the place. I think the thing that people aren't aware of with Kincaid that I think might show up a little bit more, because everyone thinks he's going to be the safety valve and the guy underneath and the guy that can get open over the middle. I think his ability to find space up the seam and on the boundary vertically, and his ability to high point the ball, is something that people are underestimating. He's done it multiple times during practice. He's got the height. He's got the hands. So I think that could be something where maybe Dawson Knox, a guy that, throughout his career has probably been the best yards after catch guy for Josh Allen. I don't know about statistically, there's actual numbers on that, but just from the eye test, I think Dawson Knox does a good job of creating yards after the catch, finishing runs, doing stuff like that. So I don't know. I think there's a way that they can use both. I think Knox can get up the seam and do stuff deep. I think Kincaid can go underneath and be that role as well. So it's really up to Ken Dorsey, and it's up to Josh Allen. Just, can Josh get it in his playmakers' hands, and can Ken Dorsey create enough opportunity for both of them to be on the field together at the same time making plays? I'm really looking forward to it. The red zone component of it is the most exciting part for me. I think those guys in the red zone at the same time, if you can get the right spacing, if you can do the things that maybe some people questioned about Ken Dorsey last season, if you can put that all together. And looking around the league, Joe, I mean, you look at the tight end duos kind of heading into this year. I mean, you have Travis Kelce and Noah Gray, but that's kind of just because Kelsey's a major force for them. So Noah Gray, yes, he has his moments, but he's not consistent. You look at Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews. That's another one that maybe you could, consider a tight end duo, but that's really just because Mark Andrews. I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a more consistent tight end duo in this league this year. And I think Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid have every opportunity to do that.
Off the top of my head, I think the only one I can think of is maybe New England's, maybe just because of Mac Jones' style, kind of a quick tempo passer, and the fact that Gesicki's so good at getting open, like in the slot, kind of a similar build or similar style to Kincaid that we're all kind of foreseeing, and Hunter Henry just being a viable red zone target. Like I could see that one panning out well, or just ending up being very productive for New England. But yeah, AJ, I agree. I think I don't talk about it enough on this show, but some of the hype of Kincaid isn't just for that safety valve approach. It is the fact that he can go upfield too, whether you want him up the seam or boundary. It's like there is just ample ways to put them together, him and Dawson Knox, and really find ways to just create mismatches, because if Kincaid is getting double covered for whatever reason, it's safe to say Knox will be having a one-on-one, most likely with either an undersized corner or a linebacker that he could easily get leverage on or just use his height on. And yeah, Dawson Knox is good with yards after the catch, man. And that's something that I think would really enhance the pairing more, because if you're having guys that are getting the ball in space but able to chug forward and get you an extra couple of yards, I mean, it just gets to a point where these defenses are going to have nightmares trying to create ways to defend that. And we haven't even talked about the pairings where you'll have them on the field and maybe even have Diggs too. Like there's just, what I really enjoy about having these two is, again, what it opens up for the rest of the offense, because I think the threat of the pairing is going to be the biggest part of the offense this year. Not even so much like, and this isn't me saying it's not going to be productive. I fully believe that 12 personnel is going to be productive for the Buffalo Bills this year. I think it's going to wind up being their primary formation on offense. Why would it not be? You've seen it work in years past with some of the best offenses in the league. Back when the Patriots had Gronk and Hernandez, it was a nightmare to defend. I think you could get a similar approach this year where that is something that they use as their base offense to really try and open things up for the rest of their playmakers, because at the end of the day, teams cannot forget about Stephon Diggs. They're going to have to respect Gabe Davis if he's getting a one-on-one matchup on the outside, which Gabe is very capable of getting open on those. He's doing it against some of the best corners in camp with Trey White. But now you're talking about these different formations, and we haven't even talked about Josh Allen's ability to run. And if you're going to drop people back and leave that box light and Allen just gets all the lane to go because you didn't respect his run on that play. What I really just enjoy about the concept of Knox and Kincaid is just the fact that it's not just about the 12 personnel. It's about everything else. And it's about how these two players, one of them who has been here for a few years and can be kind of a veteran presence, can just mold and enhance the game of the other and create this look on offense that just seems to be undefendable. But I really do believe that having the two in the same room right now and just seeing some of the chemistry that's been building in training camp and seeing these two work together as a unit is just making each other's game better, and just having that kind of dude that you're a duo with, that you're going to go onto the field with, and you know your guys on the other side. Like there's a chemistry confidence aspect to that I think doesn't get discussed enough. Like these guys are becoming friends. These guys are hanging out off the field, and now you got your boy on the field with you. Like if you've played any sport, you know how much that means to somebody. And I think that's going to be a big part of what makes this duo successful this year. Isn't even just what it brings to the table schematically, but how their chemistry can work in this offense, especially when they're building it up with Josh Allen. So, AJ, do you have any more thoughts on this duo?
Yeah, like I said, I'm really excited for what they can bring. I will say, Joe, I've been thinking about this last couple of days, and this is like the most excited look I'm looking for. I would love to see Trent Sherfield and Gabe Davis on the boundary, Knox and Kincaid in line, or one of them in line and one in the slot, whatever. And then, you have your 5 offensive linemen, and then with Cook and Allen in the backfield. I would love to see like a Trent, because Trent Sherfield and Gabe Davis are probably your primary blocking wide receivers. You have Dawson Knox, who's a really good blocker. Dalton Kincaid, he's not there yet, but I think he's willing to, and maybe he can, throughout this process, get a little better at that throughout the season. I think at this point, he'll be the worst he's at it in his career. I think he only can get better. So that's a good thing. But, yeah, I'm really excited to see the multiple looks they can do. You can use, like I said, Deontay Hardy all over the field. There's been a lot of pre-snap motion at camp. So that's something to look forward to as well. I think you'll see some gadget plays tomorrow, whether it be Hardy, Sherfield, Isabella. They have a lot of guys that can be that kind of gadget guy. So I think you're going to see a lot of that tomorrow, a lot of pre-snap motion, probably a lot of 12 personnel too, because they probably want to see how it looks, and maybe just a quarter of it, but maybe they'll implement it with Kincaid and Morris, or they do Morris and Sternberger. Maybe they try and continue to keep that kind of 12 personnel on the field throughout the game, and you see a little bit more of it than last year.
For sure. And we haven't even talked about what this could potentially do for the running game, right? Because you mentioned Sherfield and Gabe Davis as run blockers. Trent Sherfield's run blocking ability is excellent. Gabe Davis can run block. I know Dawson Knox can. Kincaid apparently in camp has had times where he struggled with it, but I'm really not expecting him to do, I don't want to say do too much of it, but I don't need him to do too much of it, if that makes sense. Because I just think you have other capable players of getting those going. And I know Kincaid developing his ability as a run blocker does benefit the 12 personnel, because then you do have the creativity to start running out of that offensive formation. So it does matter. But I do think that's something that I'm not concerned about, because I think it'll pick up over time, especially if you already have 2 very good run blockers and he's kind of in that package. And what that could bring to the offense beyond just passing is just how much you could open up for your running game on both sides of the ball. Because I'll tell you this, AJ, I'm not worried one bit about the offensive line and run blocking this year. I'm really not. I know what Mitch Morse is capable of. I know what Spencer Brown is capable of. I know that Spencer Brown could be pulled across the formation if you need him to be. I know Deion Dawkins could be a mauler in open space. Connor McGovern might be what you could consider a weak link, at least on paper right now, but I don't think he's going to have a bad time when all that's around him is kind of stepping up and making things a little bit easier for him. But when we talk about Osiris Torrance too, who's just a big body that can really get you downfield and get that block in space and create these holes for your running backs. I think if Kincaid does take that marginal step forward and run blocking, now you're going to just see even more of a nightmare scenario for defenses to deal with, because you're just opening up not only the threat of these guys getting open against your look, but now the ability to run on it with different variations of running backs, because James Cook is the speedster with really good contact balance. Latavius Murray, assuming that he's the healthy one and Damian Harris might not be ready to go, or if Damian Harris is healthy, whoever it may be, they're the power backs that can really maul people. And then in open space, if they already have their acceleration, then good luck bringing them down, because Damian Harris is one of the most pesky running backs in the NFL at that. And then, of course, Josh Allen, who brings you kind of this awkward gazelle look, but still manages to run you over as if you were standing in front of a bulldozer. Having that in 12 personnel is huge. And I think that it's really going to be something that I don't say with optimism, I'm excited for this. We could see it. I genuinely believe that's going to happen. And what this could do for this offense this year, I've said this before, AJ, I'll say it again. I really think this is going to be the most efficient offense in the league. I just feel like they have developed, and I'll, kind of bring this to our final topic, but just given what we've seen in training camp, given all the offseason acquisitions, given everything, what I am interpreting from the moves they've made and how they are performing in camp and what we might see in the preseason game is that this offense has everything they need to adjust to whatever defense they see, not so much to be over-reliant on Josh Allen, but to allow him to have the opportunity to use his skills if he needs to, or to transition into a look or formation or style that can cater against, any defense they're playing where they could be physical, run, bully you with the line of scrimmage, and be able to mow you down with some of these power backs or their speed back and Cook, or if they want to stretch the field out with Diggs and Davis and maybe Hardy to split some defenders with the speed, or if they want to bully you with a methodical paper cut style offense with Dawson Knox, with Trent Sherfield, with Dalton Kincaid getting open in the middle. It seems like, I think if you can open this up, then teams are going to focus on Josh Allen. They're going to try and mess with him. They're going to try and rattle him. Maybe they bring that too high look. And if Allen starts taking that underneath stuff and starts taking his checkdowns and has a middle of the field option that prevents teams from being able to do that, I just genuinely don't believe that this team can be defended, but rather the only possible way that they end up having any issues is by their own accord and their own mistakes and miscues and execution issues on offense, which seems to be kind of how it already is, because they're usually an offense that just beats themselves a lot. So, AJ, what do you think just about overall the way the roster is constructed and kind of what your mindset is about how this offense could look, not only in the game tomorrow, but just going forward into the season?
Yeah, dude, it's going to be important for the Bills to kind of answer that depth behind Stephon Diggs. I think on paper they've addressed it this offseason. I think they've went and got, we've mentioned so many guys throughout the show that I'm not going to repeat again, but there's so many guys on this roster that can contribute to this offense. And Joe, I was thinking this the whole time while you were speaking. It's going to be the only way this offense isn't efficient or doesn't do the things is if they beat themselves and if Josh Allen turns the ball over, both, with interceptions and fumbling. I think they're both an issue in terms of, especially last year, just as red zone interceptions. I mean, having 5 of those are costly. Those are 5 possessions that you could have got back, that you could have scored points. And also last year, it just felt like every time Josh Allen turned it over, the defense could not get a stop. Like it was almost like, yeah, the defense sometimes would make up for it, but at the same time, sometimes the defense will let you down and not get that stop even with the Josh Allen turnover. So I think that's the only thing that gets in the way of it. I mean, there's no – and maybe Ken Dorsey and maybe Josh Allen not trusting his guys to get yards in space, looking at what he's seeing on the field with his eyes, trusting his eyes and delivering the ball to his playmakers. I mean, that could be something if, Josh Allen gets too greedy and he wants to always take the deep play, and that's something that continues to happen. I mean, I could see that also being an issue. But look, it's ultimately on the offensive line blocking up front, which I think they've addressed depth-wise. The playmaking, we've seen it throughout camp. The Bills have done a great job schematically getting guys involved, using them, throughout the whole field and stuff like that. And then it comes down to the quarterback and offensive coordinator. Offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey, I think he learned a lot from last year. It's a second year calling plays. You can get that there was a whole narrative last year, first year offensive coordinators never won a Super Bowl, stuff like that. Well, there's a reason why. I think it's hard to just come into this league and call plays. He's been through a year of experience. He ran into a lot of trials, tribulations throughout the year. The offense got cold at the wrong time last year. And, you replace a Roger Saffold, who I think was just an honest take. He just wasn't good. He's very, very bad. And then you upgrade an Isaiah McKenzie, who I think has the gadget ability but can't be a slot receiver with a lot of depth. And I think with another year of Khalil Shakir in the system, there's just so many guys on this offense that I think can make it the most efficient. But, Joe, like you said, it comes down to the quarterback and the offensive coordinator. Can they make the right play calls in the right situational time periods? Can they not turn the ball over? Can Josh Allen be smart with it, trust his eyes? That's the ultimate test to what this offense can be.
Yeah, Josh Allen's mental is a huge part of it. I mean, there were times last year, even in the playoffs, where Allen wasn't taking the open guy because he was forcing things. And whether that was a schematic thing where he felt like it was the right decision, whether he just straight up didn't see him, it's to be determined. He obviously has not elaborated, but those are things that could be the hindrance to the offense. Is Allen getting too hot? Is Allen trying too hard to be the playmaker and not just trusting it? But I always refer to 2020 as the year where I feel like he put it all together and also proved that he doesn't have to be that way. And even though 21 and 22 have trended in the opposite direction, first off, they were still great statistical years. Like, he's still a top quarterback in the league. But I also think there were other reasons kind of leading up to why he kind of got overtly aggressive and kind of had to play hero ball. And in 2022 specifically, I wrote these notes down while you were talking, AJ, but in defense of Ken Dorsey, and really defense, if you want to call it, of Josh Allen, the interior offensive line was not very good. Roger Saffold did not have a very good year, even though he was a Pro Bowler. Spencer Brown was not good. He didn't have the rapport with Cromer. He had the injury. He was very sluggish to start with that offensive line and really throughout the entire year when he was healthy. You talk about Josh Allen's elbow injury, which is a huge factor when you talk about the drop off in middle of the field production, especially when Ken Dorsey has to call plays for a guy who can't really throw to that part of the field. And in addition to a bad elbow, also had really no viable slot target to boot. So when you're a Ken Dorsey and you're a year one play caller, you kind of have to rely on your deep threats because that seems to be the only part of your offense that gets, any production at all. At least, if you could chuck the ball down the field and you have an all-pro receiver in Diggs and a good vertical option in Gabe Davis, that someone will eventually get open and you could eventually have efficient, explosive drives, which still get you points, which is what the offense kind of seemed to mold into a bit because Allen wasn't hitting the middle of the field well, nor was someone giving him really much to work with there until James Cook kind of finally started stepping up into that role. And Ken Dorsey was a year one coordinator going into year two, like you said, AJ, many times, and great points. I'm glad you brought this up. Ken Dorsey entering year two is now able to create this more dynamic offense. He's able to kind of provide you with new looks, new options. And I think a part of why you saw it fall flat last year versus why you should be encouraged this year is not only what they've added, but what he's learned and how he's been able to kind of scheme based on the deficiencies of the team. Now he can do it based on their strengths. And I think any offensive coordinator is going to have those growing pains. My one thing that I will say is I just hope that Dorsey has the ability to reel Josh in if he gets too hot. Like we've talked about before in spaces and people have said he can get a little too extreme. I do think that that's something that he needs to cool down with and be able to give Josh the ability to kind of chill, literally chill out and just hope that he can reel him in and understand that there are underneath options that you can take to move the ball a little more at pace, at will, and not have to worry about turning it over. So, AJ, do you have any final thoughts for our episode today?
Got nothing. Actually, we've talked, so much about, we really dove into the game Saturday. We dove into training camp quite a bit. We talked about a lot of positions, a lot of depth pieces, the offense, the defensive side of the ball. Joe, I just want to thank you for having me. And, if you're listening to this tomorrow, stay tuned to Cover One. They do great stuff, great things, a lot of great people there. I interned there I'm fortunate enough to intern there for a semester. So be sure to subscribe to this, and that's what helps them continue to grow their brand.
Thank you so much, AJ. Yes, we really appreciate any likes you can throw to this video. Again, I apologize I wasn't able to go live for all of you this week. I love going live. I'm very excited to do it again next week. I'll have a very, very special guest, almost as special as Ajay Cybulski on. I appreciate you, AJ. You were great today. I always appreciate you taking time to come on the show. You're welcome back anytime. But it's not all love for just us over here. And again, if you have subscribed, liked this video, please do so. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. But AJ, Mr. AJ over here has a show going on over there at Buffalo Rumblings, and I'm sure he'd love to tell you all about it right now.
Yeah, I do a show every Monday night at 7 o'clock. It's called Aegis Analysis. I have a lot of audio listeners. I would like to get some more YouTube viewers, get some comments going. It's been better the past couple of weeks, but the audio presence has been great. I've enjoyed seeing all the comments on the show and stuff like that. So I appreciate all the support, and I'm looking forward to staying at that time slot throughout the whole season. And again, Monday at 7. So on 9/11 Bills Jets game, I will be live at 7 o'clock right before game time. So I am looking forward to that show quite a bit. But yeah, I have guests on all the time. I do my own thing as well. I talk by myself. I'm trying to get better with that too. So yeah, I'm catch me at Buffalo Rumblings. Follow me on Twitter. I do a lot of updates, a lot of my crazy opinions, maybe far hinged at times, maybe a little hypothetical, but that's what I do over on my Twitter at Ajay Cybulski.
Sometimes they'll even get players to comment. The one dude I know that got a Stephon Diggs response. That's freaking awesome, man. But yeah, no, AJ, again, thank you so much to all of you that are watching this video after we have done our recording today. I want to thank you again. I will be live 11 a.m. this upcoming Saturday for all of you. I'll be back to normal time. I have a really cool guest I'm excited to introduce when we do that show, but I'll save that as a surprise. But if you're listening to Cover One, we appreciate all of you. Please like, subscribe over to Buffalo Rumblings as well. They do a lot of great work over there and give guys like AJ the platform he deserves to talk about Bills football with all of you. Once again, AJ, your time has been greatly appreciated. You enjoy the game tomorrow. And for all of you watching this, enjoy, stay safe, have a wonderful weekend. And as always, go Bills.
Previous